Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Film Room Podcast. This is episode 39. I am your host, Joe Baress, along with my co-host, Joby Fawcett. Joby, after you were able to finally log in, we're having some issues with the login here, but you're here now, and that's great. How are you doing?
Well, Joe, after what has been an extremely busy day, I'm in a little bit better mood.
Good.
Today, I just happened to watch my favorite episode of Seinfeld, which was the Hamptons episode.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Of course, one of the co-stars is a Scranton Central graduate, Melanie Smith, who played Jerry's girl. Of course, she played Jerry's girlfriend in that episode, and I think you are quite familiar with some of the great one-liners she had. She was kosher in that, by the way, Joe. And she could not eat the shellfish, but George somehow got the shellfish into the eggs without anyone's knowledge and sabotaged her breakfast. But that being said, Joe, there was a lot of highlights in that episode. If you get a chance to rewatch it, it certainly will put you in a very good mood for the rest of the evening. And now I have a full night ahead of writing some state track and field stories in preparation for the big weekend in Shippensburg, by which, Joe, I bought several sweatshirts to get myself ready for the parka-like weather we're going to be having in Shippensburg on Friday and Saturday.
Absolutely, and that is a great lead-in to our guest. We are once again joined by the Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week. This week it is Kaylyn Davis out of Lakeland Track and Field. Kaylyn, how we doing?
I'm doing well today. Still a little sick from last week, carrying into this week, but I'm feeling better, starting to feel better. But yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what Kaylyn did last week, she had 3 gold medals, repeating as javelin champion, winning the 100 hurdles, and being a part of the 1600 meter relay team that had season best time. She also earned a silver medal in the 300 meter hurdles, qualifying for states on time for that event as well, in leading Lakeland to its second straight District 2 Class 2A title. Kaylyn, I was, as you had mentioned, it actually leads into my first question. Some of us, maybe Joby knew, but some of us didn't even know that you did all that with the flu. It reminds me of Michael Jordan and the flu game. What was it like kind of trying to navigate through districts, do as well as you did while having the flu?
Well, I guess you just have to take it like any other challenge, whether it be an injury, whether it be sickness, because obviously something like a sickness, whether it be like just a random infection or like a respiratory kind of issue like I had with the flu, it's just figuring out how to navigate it to get yourself up to the best caliber to perform. It's about catching it as quickly as possible and getting yourself the right care, the right diagnosis, medication and whatnot that you might need, especially beyond like any kind of medication that you can take, getting a lot of rest, making sure that you're resting up and sleeping and just kind of getting good food in and hydrating especially, it is extremely important. But it's really just figuring out how to navigate the sickness to kind of nurse yourself up to health to where that you can perform well, or you feel well enough to perform.
And Kaylyn, you certainly did perform very well. Let's start with the javelin throw, because as you and I were talking about it in the infield, you launched your winning throw of 128 feet 1 inch to set a new school record on your very first throw. And that kind of put you in a good spot for the remainder of the competition. You had other throws that were, pretty far as well and would have beaten anybody else in the competition. But having that first one go out there that far, how did that help you? And of course, what did it feel like to defend your title?
So kind of getting that mark out there at the very first throw, I feel like it kind of like sets a tone, and it also just like gives me a sense of confidence knowing that I had thrown a respectable distance, and kind of makes you feel a little bit secure going into your next couple throws, knowing that, okay, I could PR again, I could add a couple more inches, a little bit more distance to my previous throw. But if I don't, I'm still in a secure spot where I can be very well going into like the end of the competition, especially because this is the one of the events where you do first flight, second flight finals. So just knowing that you kind of got one out there in your first couple throws before you're tired in the finals, it's very reassuring. It just makes you feel very secure and confident about your performance just going into it initially. And to kind of defend my title, it feels great, especially in the respect of just the increase in distance from last year compared to this year. So I feel like I remember last year at the district championship, my throw was nearly 10 feet, give or take, below what I had thrown at districts this year. And it's just the progress that I had seen from last year to this year. And just defending that title felt really great.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think where I'd like you to go next is tell me about the two hurdle events. You're able to win the 100 and finish second in the 300, qualify for states. Obviously you're going against some really good competition. Natalie Toludo out of Mid-Valley. Tell me, how did you think you performed in those hurdle events at districts?
So in the 100 hurdle prelims, kind of just had the goal of like winning my heat, securing my spot in the finals, because yeah, you can go out and PR, but it doesn't matter ultimately until the day of the finals on day 2. But as for the 300, I don't know. I tend to kind of like lose my train of thought when I think about hurdles. I kind of just like, you just got to block everything out of your mind and go out and do it, because like you can be nervous all you want, but at the end of the day, like once you get in the blocks, it's a different breed. It's definitely a different feeling. And once that gun goes off, it's just like dig in and go. And definitely happy I had like hit the state qual time. Very proud of myself for that. But yeah, the 300 was definitely one of those races where the wind just kind of hits you and you're just like clawing your way to the finish line.
Yeah.
doing whatever it takes.
Yeah, and you also had a very long day on day 1 of the track and field championships, and the 300 hurdles capped that. But certainly on day 2, Kaylyn, for you to run such a fantastic personal best time in the 100-meter hurdles in winning that race, obviously there's a little bit of a soft spot whenever someone from Lakeland does well in the hurdles event, because that is my favorite event. And so I was real happy for you, because in talking with you earlier in the season, you were really working hard on trying to 3-step the entire flight of hurdles. And I thought you hit your peak at the perfect time at the district meet. Tell me about that race in the 100 hurdles and how great it felt to win it.
It definitely did feel great. I remember vividly crossing the line and looking up at the giant scoreboard at the Scranton Stadium and seeing the time there. And I was just, honestly, I was in utter shock, just because if you asked me 2 months ago if I ever thought I'd be able to run that time, I probably would have laughed in your face and told you there's no way that's going to happen. But ultimately, it just came down to trusting the process and trusting my training and coming into practice and putting forth the effort I do every single day to get to the point that I did for the performance to even happen and to be able to perform to that caliber and put up a time like that. And as you said, like, yes, my coach Chet Anaseski, like in his plan and his training, like had me peak at the right time. So yeah, I guess all that I had worked this season towards has paid off, as I saw after my finish in the 100 hurdles on last Tuesday.
Kaylyn, so listen, you join a very exclusive group of Lakeland champion hurdlers in girls track and field. What does that mean to you? Cassidy Jenkins is the record holder. She's a multiple time state medal winner. Madison Harding is on that list. She also won multiple district and state medals. So That's got to make you feel pretty great that you're on that list with some of the best athletes Lakeland's ever had in track and field.
Oh, definitely. Just even being compared to an athlete like Cassidy Jenkins or Madison Harding just feels great because, like, I can remember a few years ago, like, just being coached by a man named Ryan Nolan, and he had coached Cassidy Jenkins and also my current coach, Chet Anashevsky, and just, like, hearing him talk about, like, the way that these Lakeland alumni had performed and the way they did the hurdles and just how well they did and their skill. And even one time I had remembered Cassidy had come up to a practice one time and, like, was helping us do some drills, and just to be compared to someone like her, it feels great. And to be, like, not on the same level but on that list with these athletes that have gone to my school and performed at the caliber they did, it feels great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because, javelin, hurdles, and you weren't done. You are we're part of the 1600 meter relay team that also captured gold, not only winning gold, but, hitting that season best time. I mean, at the beginning of the year, in every sport, you always want to be at your best in the biggest moments. And, obviously that relay team was. How was that team, able to perform at their best when it was most needed? What kind of worked for you guys to get to that moment?
So, as I've probably mentioned before in different interviews about, like, the Lakeland girls track team, we push each other so much in every practice, in every workout, and we are always putting in the effort and striving to get better, which had allowed us to translate into a very good 4x400 meter relay. Just, like, the trust we kind of place in each other. There's not necessarily one quote unquote bad leg that you have to strategize to put in a certain spot, because you know that, like, your teammate's going to go out there and they're going to be pretty secure. And just, like, we've had this motivation to win the district title in the 4x4 and go to states ever since we had run at the North Penn Open down at North Penn High School in March, and we had run our time from the previous districts, so 2024 districts at North Penn, and with a completely different 4x4 team. So, and we're just talking to each other and we're like, hey, like, we can do really good this year. We can go to the state. We can drop our time. We can become really good. And that has stuck with us the entire season. And we have pushed through so many obstacles and just pushed each other past so many limits to get to this point. And I'm proud of this team and I'm proud of these girls and I love them very much. And it was definitely a great experience to run the time that we did in the 4x4 and just know that we went out there and we did everything we possibly could.
Well, Kaylyn, you guys were fantastic in that race. And I know one of the legs, Deanna Warmoth, was injured. So to have her kind of gut out a 400 on a severely injured foot was impressive. But all the girls, Faith Warmoth and Bria Hill, you guys all did a great job to cap the meet. And what an impressive meet it was. Now, I know last year you did not win the Jordan Relays, but since that meet, you've won the Spagna Championship 2 years in a row and the District 2 Championship 2 years in a row. And this year, Kaylyn, 136.5 points. That may be a record for the girls' 2A meet, but what a special group this was. What does it mean to you to be a part of such a special group?
It means absolutely everything. It definitely means so much to me just because this group of girls, just kind of growing up with them and growing together and just running together and being pushed through so many challenges and just having to be there for each other and trust each other. It's definitely in a bonding aspect. It's definitely something because of just the way we are. with each other. We're a very close group. We don't have a lot of depth on the team, but we are a very close group of girls. And just for us to kind of trust each other and push each other past our limits and put the effort forth and just work hard towards our individual goals and our team goals kind of fueled us to repeat a district championship as we had done previously in 2024, as well as a Spagna championship as we did in 2024 and 2023, and then win Jordan relays for the first time. And I don't know when the last time we won the Jordan relays title was, but we did that too. But I love these girls, and this team means absolutely everything. Just the way that we are to each other and the vibe that the team brings to practice every day. It's definitely something special and something unique about us.
Yeah, definitely, Kaylyn. Getting back to you individually, I'm always impressed by last week we had Caitlin Kravitz on, and just asking her how she balances all her events. You've got to go from, throwing to hurdling to running. It seems like a lot to balance, but tell me, like, how are you kind of able to balance, get in time to do everything, get in practice time for throwing and hurdling and all that stuff? What is it like kind of balancing all your events?
Well, as far as practice goes, it's all about putting the time in. Sometimes you can't get to everything in one day. Sometimes you have a really hard workout and you're just really sore and you might just go ice your shins and then go home. But sometimes you get done with whatever your coach tells you to do for sprinting. Like, okay, sprinters do this, this, and this, right? You get done with your sprinting stuff, and then I would go do some hurdle stretches and hurdle drills. And then once I was done with my hurdle drills, I would go up and throw jab, or at least do some jab technique if I wasn't feeling like doing full run-ups and completely exhausting myself. Because there's definitely a type of balance between hitting enough training and trying to not burn yourself out, because it definitely is a lot.
Right.
Having to do all these events, but it's just about balance. It's about kind of listening to your body and kind of putting in the time, but not pushing yourself so hard that you quite literally force yourself into burnout. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of just balance throughout weeks and weeks of practice. But I guess as far as meets go, sometimes you got to be in two places at once, it feels like. And at some point, you just get used to it. I've been doing this for years. As far as I can remember, I've done 4 events, a couple changes along the way, but it's definitely very panic inducing at first, because you're like, oh, I have to be over here, but then no, I have to do this and I have to run and I have to throw. But at some point you just learn to kind of calm yourself down, and you assess the situation. You're like, okay, well, I can warm up for, say, let's use districts as an example. Let's say warm up for 100 hurdles and see how much time it is until, say, the 4x8s. And maybe while there was a little break period, go up, talk to the JAB officials, say, hey, I have to run this event. I don't know what time exactly things are going to happen, but I just know I have to be down there and I have to run. And sometimes they will work with you. They'll be very open to working with you, moving you around the flight, and either putting you, if you were in the second flight, putting you in the first flight, or kind of expediting your throws, making you throw after every other 2 people or after every other person, just so you can get some throws in and still do your other events. So it's all about you just gotta kind of try and make things work for yourself. So it's just about assessing the situation and seeing what you can do to kind of put yourself in the best situation, and then just paying attention to what time events are going on to see when you have to warm up, or if you're going to be in another event while you should be warming up, and how quick you can get down there. And just kind of being able to coordinate that in a meet is definitely the biggest part, especially when sometimes in meets you don't have a lot of time in between events.
Yeah, it's certainly a busy schedule for you, Kaylyn, and it's only going to get more busy. Having been to the state meet last year, how much are you looking forward to this trip, albeit having to deal with the miserable weather we're going to have?
Well, I'm very excited, definitely. Last year I had only gone for the javelin, so definitely a lot off my plate there last year, but I'm definitely excited to go back. I feel like I'm in better position than I was last year, feeling more confident than my previous year when I had gone to the state championship for the first time. I definitely have a better feeling about this year, and as far as the weather goes, it's nothing that we aren't used to in northeastern PA. Because listen, 65 degrees, sun, wind, for those kids that are used to running in 80-degree weather. I mean, we love the Shippensburg 80-degree weather, but listen, we'll take 65 in Scranton all day.
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. I love it. So I think now, Kaylyn, I'm an idiot, but will you compete in every event that you like got gold in and silver, or do you scratch out of any? Like,
No, I'm not planning on scratching out of any events. I can't predict if I'm going to make it out of preliminaries for any of the races, but I'm definitely going to give it a shot at all four.
Okay,
I think that's so cool. And Joe, let's not throw that word scratch around. That's not allowed when you go to the state meet.
Sorry, I listen. I don't know. I see the words.
I know she would have had to have done that already. We don't want to do that, Joe.
Okay. No? Well, see, that's why I opened the question with "I'm an idiot." You know,
well, that's your own definition, Joe. I don't throw that around.
That is true.
Well, Kaylyn, I want to wish you the very best of luck at States. I look forward to seeing you compete down there, and real happy for you for all that you accomplished in helping Lakeland win that team championship as well. And have a great trip on Thursday when you go down there.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kaylyn, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Joe, she did have a very busy couple of days there at the district track and field championships. You know, as she mentioned, you have to go from the running the trials of the 100 hurdles, the javelin, then you have to go to the 300 hurdles, and then she has to finish off with the mile relay. It was quite a busy, 2 days for her.
Well, I was going to say, it's see, it was crazy just listening to Kaylyn talk about, how you have to balance everything.
It's kind of like you trying to balance when you're going to go for lunch and dinner. And
that's right, Joby. See, like
when you're going to go to the movies and then try to squeeze in your work day.
And like, I can't do that. So like, could you imagine? I just like, it was funny as she was explaining it. My head was spinning. So, so it's just, it's really impressive. Again, another very, very impressive.
So she had an outstanding meet in what was a very impressive 2-day track and field championship meet that we had at Scranton Veterans Memorial Stadium. We want to congratulate first and foremost the team champions. We mentioned already that Lakeland girls won the 2A championship and that the Dallas girls won the girls 3A championship in almost as impressive fashion as what Lakeland did in Class 2A. Both teams were very, very dominant in their efforts, and a couple of the Dallas girls are seeded quite well for the state championship meet. So that should be something that we look forward to in Shippensburg this weekend. And then on the boys' side of things, very impressive performance by the Mid-Valley boys to win the AA team championship. Joe, they had some adversity to deal with leading up to this championship meet, and they dealt with it like real mature adults. And they had a great performance in winning that team championship. A couple of gold medal winners as well. I think we were familiar with Jacob Lesher and what he's done this year.
Oh, yeah.
Joe, he's a district champion in the high jump. And Gavin Rapuch, all-region linebacker for the Spartans in the fall. He won the javelin championship, and Mid-Valley was able to pile up enough points over the course of the other 16 events to win the team championship there. And then 3A, the Wilkes-Barre area Wolfpack captured the team championship. Now, Joe, what's bizarre about this, not bizarre, but what's very kind of historic is it's the first track and field team championship for the joined Wilkes-Barre area high school team. And if you can remember back to the old days, Joe, when Myers and Coughlin and GAR, these are track and field programs that won countless district championships and state team championships. So those three programs have been combined, and now they have finally reached the pinnacle and won the championship in the Class 3A team race there last week. And if you caught the state seed that we had online yesterday, I believe, or yesterday afternoon, Joe, somebody was working on a Sunday.
That's right.
And Tim Leonard, a junior sprinter from Wilkes-Barre, who we talked about earlier in the year on the podcast as being one of the fastest guys in the state of Pennsylvania. He's got the number 1 seed for the 100-meter dash after he set a record with his 10.60 second clocking in winning the 100-meter dash. He broke the record of Pittston area legend John DeSoy, Joe, and he's a multiple-time state champion in the sprint. So we have a lot of good stuff coming up in Shippensburg University on Friday and Saturday, and I'll have a couple of stories leading up into that 2-day track and field championship meet.
Absolutely. Joby, is there anything else you want to touch on before we're going to do something for the first time in Film Room podcast history and try to bring on a guest mid-show?
Joe, I hope you can
Scott
pull
Walsh.
this off. Based on my technological inefficiencies to start the program, I hope you can pull this off.
I was going to say, this may absolutely fail. And it's funny because the listeners will find out if it fails, after this. At this point, I have no idea if it's going to fail or not, and it will be no fault of Scott's. It will be mine. But
however, Joe,
we'll see how this works out.
Feel free to blame Scott if it doesn't work.
Oh, of course. Everyone needs a scapegoat. And
absolutely. Passing the buck is something we're very good at.
Absolutely. So if there's anything else you want to touch on before, we really want to do a baseball and softball preview here, as softball is actually underway as we speak for the district playoffs, and baseball gets started tomorrow. So anything else you want to touch on?
I'm good, Joe. Just quickly recapping the District 2 tennis. We had doubles championships on Friday last week.
Yep.
And Abington Heights, very impressive. Brady Comstock and Liam Farrell, the number 2 seed, beat their teammates Will Harp and Dominic Peters, the team that was the defending champions in the Class 3A championships. So certainly congratulations to them. That made a clean sweep for Abington Heights of the district gold medals and the team championships.
Yep.
Abington Heights won the team championship. Pranil Malaha won the singles championship, and then the team of Brady Comstock and Liam Farrell win the doubles championship. So congratulations to them.
Absolutely.
But that's my stuff for you, Joe. And I know we have lacrosse playoffs going on right now. And because they've started, the softball and baseball playoffs are in full swing right now, or starting today and tomorrow. Volleyball starts Tuesday and Wednesday, Joe. I had a little story in the paper.
You sure did.
My good friends up at Blue Ridge, who I follow diligently, I really enjoyed that program over the previous 2 seasons with Connor Cranage and that group. They were just so energetic and so excited, and had a great run of what I say was 45 and 46 and 3 in 2 years.
Right.
That's not too bad, Joe.
Absolutely. Yeah, Joby, you keep giving me, it's funny because you do a lot of work, which I really appreciate. You often bail me out, but you write a story, and then I've got to, try to get it in the paper and get it online everywhere. You keep putting me to work.
I apologize. My fault.
I kid. I
know. Listen, I have to drink more tonight than so.
Exactly. So, but yeah, to quickly mention lacrosse, we've got when you're listening to this, these games will be over. We are recording on a Monday night. It is presently 5:15, but Sam Freeman, our colleague, will be at Class 2A girls semifinal between North Pocono and Abington, and he will follow that up with covering the boys Class 2A semifinal between Crestwood and Abington. Those are at 5 and 7. So be sure to follow along. Go to the website. They'll be online tonight. Sam is usually very, very quick with his stories, so they'll be up tonight. And other than that,
Joe, if I may, really quickly, great. Sam did a couple of nice preview stories on the North Pocono girls lacrosse program and the goalies at Delaware Valley. We touched on it a little bit last week. And if you can remember back to last spring, Joe, I used to cover girls and boys lacrosse. And I just want to quickly congratulate all the great players and teams that have had great success this year. I didn't get a chance. Obviously, I handed the baton, so to speak, in track talk to Sam Freeman this year. And he's done a wonderful job of, trying to keep people informed of what's going on in what has been a very highly competitive season in the Willamette Valley Conference. And the one thing I did want to point out, Joe, is, we've had Maya Monticelli on the show here on the podcast. And what a great, at the time we spoke to her, it was early in the season. And this was a young program. I think North Pocono is only in its 4th or 5th year. Probably its 5th year, because she'd be a senior and she played all 4 years. But my point is, it's not easy to start a program from scratch. And
no,
certainly not in the Willamette Valley Conference, which is known for very competitive lacrosse. And you always get a sense of feeling good about a program that has kind of climbed the ladder the right way. And the same could be said for Abington Heights girls team and the Abington Heights boys team, which is also a young program and upstart program. And you see the success that they've had. Scranton Prep boys, of course, they were part of this kind of boom that happened a couple of years ago that spawned out of the Scranton Lacrosse Club. And it's nice to see that these teams now from the LIAA have gotten themselves to a point where they're extremely competitive and challenging for championships in District 2. So great job by all of them. And again, kudos also to the teams from the Willamette Valley Conference, which are always pretty competitive.
Absolutely. All right, Joby, we are going to take a break. I'm going to pause the episode.
Okay.
And hopefully on the other side of this break, we will be joined by Scott Walsh. So
I'm crossing my fingers and my toes.
I know. We'll see how this goes. But yes, all right. Hello, everybody. We're back. We weren't sure that this was going to work out, but we are now joined by our colleague for the first time on the Film Room Podcast, episode 39. We are joined by Scott Walsh. Scott, how's it going?
First time ever, Joe.
Yes, I love ever in episode in Film Room history. Yes,
Film Room history.
Exactly. So hey, we appreciate you taking time out of your day. Scotty is actually off today, and I just called him like a half hour before the show. And he has now adjusted my life and bailed me out again, as he usually does. So, Scotty, we appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely.
It's great to have you, Scotty. And I am going to be a gracious co-host. And I am going to exit stage left, but it's always great to hear your voice. We don't get to see each other as much anymore now that you're a bigwig. And so I'm going to check out Scotty and listen very intently to your in-depth analysis of the baseball and softball postseason, which I know is going to go deep into June for you. And believe me when I tell you, I'm starting to sympathize with the long hours you're going to be putting in over the course of the next month, Scotty. So get that grass cut after you're done with Joey and get yourself buried into the laptop. You got a lot of work to do, my friend.
Thanks, Joe. And enjoy your little track meet this weekend. I know you got a little event going on. So
I have a little tiny track meet I have to deal with, Scotty. I just told everyone earlier I bought some sweatshirts and some parkas because it's going to be very, very chilly in Shippensburg.
Right. It brings some rain gear too.
Scotty, you know how much I dislike bad weather.
Don't we all?
Terrible. All right. Have a good show, Joe. Thanks a lot for everything.
Thanks, Joby. Stay warm. We'll see you later. All right. So, Scotty. And then there were two.
Just the two of us, Joe, like it always is.
That's right. So, hey, for those who don't know, I'm sure everyone knows, Scotty is always busy, but it just feels like you're extremely busy this spring sports season. Baseball, covering baseball, softball, the Rail Riders, Ron Jaworski when he's here at a graduation. So I figured it was a good idea to bring Scott on to discuss a little baseball, softball district playoffs, which softball gets underway today. Again, we're recording this on Monday. So, Scott, I think, like I said, we're going to we're going to just go through every classification and talk a little bit about whatever you want to talk about. So, all right. So starting with baseball, Class 6A, we've got a couple of matchups tomorrow. Delaware Valley at Scranton. That's a 4-versus-5 matchup. And we have Wilkes-Barre area hosting Wyoming Valley West. Waiting in the semifinals with byes are Hazleton area, the 1 seed, and Williamsport, the 2 seed. Scotty, I mean, Hazleton area is probably the team to beat here. Anything you want to touch on in the 6A playoffs?
Yeah, Hazleton is probably the team to beat, but I think this year the field is a little more wide open than it's been in past years. Hazleton is very good team. Don't get me wrong; they're 15-5, but they're not that dominant. I don't think they're that dominant team that they've been in past years. So clearly you're going to have to knock them off.
Right.
Williamsport is a good team, but Wilkes-Barre's got a good pitcher in James Botcher. Scranton is got a a pretty good team as well. They've got Thor Kelly, Henry Bartlebaugh are provide a pretty good 1-2 combo on the mound. And they have beaten a couple of number 1 seeds in the field. They beat Holy Redeemer this year, which is the number 1 in 2A, and they beat Mid Valley, which is the number 1 in 4A. So they're more than capable. And don't count Delaware Valley and Wyoming Valley West out either. So I just think that, yes, Hazleton is the favorite, but would I be surprised if somebody knocked them off? Not necessarily, because I think the field's a little more wide open than it's been in years past.
I hear you. And I should mention that Scotty actually has a feature in tomorrow's paper and Tuesday's paper on Thor Kelly, along with baseball capsules for every classification, breaking it down as well. They'll be those 2 things will be online as well. But hey, pick up a paper, visit the website. There's a lot of good stuff there from baseball. Preview action. All right, Scotty, so let's go to Class 5A. This is another intriguing classification. You've got Piston area as the top seed. Abington Heights as the number 2 seed. They get the byes to the semifinals, which are scheduled for Thursday. But tomorrow we have Dallas hosting Wallenpaupack, and we have North Pocono hosting West Scranton. I mean, there's a lot of talent here. We've had Abington Heights, North Pocono, still waiting on a league champion there. But obviously, Piston area, they got Elijah Barr, Nick Bradley for Abington Heights, 2 great pitchers in the area. But yeah, it should be an interesting classification, Scotty.
Yeah, this is the one everyone's waiting for. Yeah, all season long, people are looking. I've kind of circled, Pittston and Abington in a district final, and I know I'm if it does get to be that, I'm looking forward to that too. But don't discount North Pocono.
Right.
They did beat Abington Heights the last time they met. Last Monday. And they certainly. They would have to meet, if they win their first round match against West Scranton, they would play Abington again they would meet Abington in the semifinals. So, but, looking at it on paper, Pittston and Abington, it would be a heck of a final. You mentioned Elijah Barr, you mentioned Nick Bradley, the Auburn commit, and he's 8-0 this year. 0.30 ERA, 77 strikeouts. He's the leader. They got a good. The Comets have a good lineup up and down. Guys like Thomas Laco and Tate Pentasuglio, Reese Zaluski. They've got a really sound 1 through 9 lineup and everything. So. If that does wind up being, and it's kind of a shame that only one of them is going to get, one team that goes for fight. You'd love to say, you'd love to see a game like that. And, if Pittston were to knock off Abington or Abington knock off Pittston, you'd love to see, one of them say, hey, see both of them go on to the state playoffs and maybe see what they can do. But, unfortunately they only, the district only gets one bid and only one team can go. So I think that though, it makes the district final a potential final that much more intense, knowing that one team season, is going to end after that game.
Absolutely. And as Scotty, I should mention, obviously the district championships will not be at PNC Field this year. Weather has been obviously a disaster, and could be more. It could be could be a problem this week too, Scotty. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
No, the forecast doesn't look that good. But yeah, you mentioned, I just want to point you not being at PNC Field. I think if that was the final, that game would have really, really jammed that jammed PNC Field, because I think a lot of people would have come out to see that, to see that game too. So just want to point out too, one other thing. Pittston did beat Abington earlier in the season 6-5, but it was like the second or third game of the season, and Bradley didn't pitch that game. So so even though Pittston has beaten Abington Heights once, I mean, you're talking, that's the beginning, the season. So many things are different now that we've gotten from March to May. So,
and you're bringing it up too. It's just like it's got to be so hard for these teams to try to figure out, because obviously you're dealing with pitch counts, you're dealing with it's just like, who do you pitch in certain situations? Do you try to save people? It's just it's I don't envy these managers at all.
Yeah, I mean, you take for example, like clearly Pittston and Abington, by having the bye, have the advantage.
Right.
Okay, because they can pitch their number one, and it'll be enough time in between to pitch their number one again.
Right.
Okay, but a game like North Pocono and West, does North Pocono take a chance?
Right.
And not pitch its number one pitcher? Does it not pitch Cal Hafner? Does it go with maybe its number two against West Scranton and take a chance, so that now, when they meet, if they do win that game, now they've got their number one lined up for Abington Heights. And I just use them as an example. In any of these teams, it's the same way. Do you take a chance on because you could always run that risk of, not getting to the next round, and everything, and the move backfire on you.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned too, you lose, you're out. There's no, there's no going to states.
Yeah. This ain't a double elimination tournament where you can come back.
Exactly.
It's one and done. You lose, your season's over.
That's right. Sky, there's no blood rounds in my, like in my wrestling sport.
Like in your wrestling, yeah.
Yeah. So, but let's move on to Class 4A here. Mid-Valley is the top seed. They'll get started tomorrow, again Tuesday, against Nanticoke area, the 8th seed. We've got a 4-5 matchup with Scranton Prep hosting Valley View. Also, we have Crestwood hosting Berwick, the 2 seed, against the 7 seed. And then on, it looks like Wednesday, Honesdale will travel to Wyoming area in that matchup. So, obviously, I know that Mid-Valley is a very, very good team with a lot of talent. They are the top seed. Scotty, what do you think of this Class 4A bracket?
Yeah, I think Mid-Valley was in 3A last year, and they won a district title in 3A, so now they're up to 4A this year. I think this clearly is their tournament to lose.
Yeah.
16-4. I really like this team. They've got their top to bottom. They got a good offense. Nick Mills, pitch at risk to this kid. And teams don't. Teams will, if first base is open, teams will intentionally walk him to pitch around it, because the kid is just a slugger, hitting 440, 5 home runs, 26 RBIs. He's got a couple of table setters, ahead of him, Anthony Balashitis and Joey Romanowski. And then he's got a pretty good hitter behind him, Douglas Pua, who, if you do pitch around him, can make the strategy backfire. I've seen it happen a couple times this year where, teams have walked Mills, and Pua's come through with a clutch hit to knock in some runs and everything. So, and the Spartans are deep. They got good pitching too. They got Mills. They've got Cooper Lucas Savage, as their 1-2, and then senior Lorenzo Hernandez. He's almost like a closer. Usually the formula is get 5 innings out of Mills and Lucas Savage, and then bring Hernandez in to throw smoke for the last 2 innings and everything. So they clearly, I honestly, it's their, like I said, it's their bracket to lose. Who might get to the final? It's kind of a toss up. Crestwood and Wyoming area, I think both have the potential to get hot at the right time and maybe and get to the final and challenge Mid-Valley. Scranton Prep always seems, when it comes to district playoff time, to be peaking. They always seem to peak at this time of the year. They won 4 of their last 5 games coming into the postseason. So maybe they can pull. Well, they would have to meet maybe meet Mid Valley in the semis. Could they pull off an upset?
Right.
And everything. So it's like I said, I think it's Mid Valley's to lose tournament to lose. Who might get there against them in a final situation is a little bit of a toss up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe, Scotty, you were at one of those games that Pua came up big, actually covering it. So yeah, they seem
I think it was against Riverside. Yeah, I think it was against Riverside that he did that. Yeah.
Yep. And speaking of Riverside, in Class 3A, we do have Dunmore as the top seed. They have a bye into the semifinals. Lakeland will travel to Montrose tomorrow. Lake Lehman will host Western Wayne, and Riverside will host Carbondale area. Scotty, I just following from afar, Dunmore has had a really, really good season. They beat Riverside, I believe, twice this season. What are we looking at in Class 3A?
Dunmore's had a really great year. They have a real potent offense. They actually set a school record for wins in the season with 17. They've hit 20 home runs as a team. They've got a real potent attack, and also they got some pitching depth too. Guys like Jamie McMinn is 6-0 with a 1.50 ERA and 46 strikeouts. Mason Stetz is 5-0, 41 strikeouts and 1.24 ERA. And then they've got an all-state kid in Max Forgione, on the mound. And Forgione also is, kind of leads the offense a little bit with, he's got seven home runs. So this team, this team, has got the offense. They've got the pitching to do it. The other thing I like too is they've been in a lot of close games, and they've won those games. Six of their last 9 games have been decided by 2 runs or less, and they're 5-1 in those games.
Right.
So, when you get to playoff time, that's what you see. You get these games, you get these tight games, these tight 1-run games where, or maybe you fall behind and you've got to battle back. And Dunmore's done that all season. So they'll be battle tested. Don't discount Riverside. They're the same thing too. Saying, very, very potent offense. Good, guys like, Chase Dodonio, Nick Bohenick, Jason Puzzlesny, good pitchers, Ethan Slocum, Connor McNally. They've got a pretty good leadoff batter in Jose Sosa. Chris Graff, their catcher, has got 4 home runs. So they've got a potent attack, and they've got the pitching, that could if they do get to the final, could get there, or could give Dunmore a bit of a battle. Lehman's a good team too. I wouldn't be, that Riverside Lehman potentially match up in the semifinals is going to be a good one. They've obviously got good pitching and good and good hitting. Montrose, I think, is a little bit of an unknown. They've got a couple of kids that have been around for 2 or 3 years, and could they surprise perhaps?
Right.
A kid like a CJ McGee is both their offensive leader and their pitching leader. So they could be a little bit of a surprise as well. But Dunmore, I think going in you would have to rate them as the favorite in 3A.
Absolutely. Scotty, are you just doing this off the top of your head too? This is impressive.
No, I've got full disclosure. I've got my notes.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
I got my notes.
I was like, holy cow. They're going to be really impressed. So
you just promoted the fact that we're running we're running playoff capsules in the preview capsules in the, in the paper and going to be online. So I had to get the information from somewhere.
That's a good point.
So I made all sorts of notes and wrote the capsules.
That's fair, Scotty. That is fair. So, all right, well, moving on to Class 2A, we've got Holy Redeemer as the top seed. They will host number 8 Blue Ridge tomorrow. Wyoming Seminary is going to host Mountain View in a 4-5 matchup on Wednesday. Old Forge will host Lackawanna Trail tomorrow, and Elk Lake will host Holy Cross on Wednesday. Scotty, this is what do you know about this? I mean, I know that like Elk Lake has had a very, very good season as the 2 seed, but Holy Redeemer is very good as well. What are you looking at in Class 2A?
I'm looking at a couple of very intriguing matchups, potential matchups. Holy Redeemer is it obviously is a is a formidable team. They're, the same record as Elk Lake, 16 and 4. As the 1 seed, you'd say you'd have to rate them as the favorite. Elk Lake, though, coming in, has a lot of, again, they're loaded. They've got a loaded lineup. They've got a deep pitching staff. Guys like Braden McMinn and Dawson Sherman, Noah Guestford, Aiden Felker. They've got a pretty stacked lineup. And they lost the district final last year. They won it 2 years ago and they lost it last year. So, going into the season, I remember talking to some of their kids at the media day out at PNC Field back in the beginning of March, and their mission was kind of like to bring back the district title. So
right.
Never discount Old Forge. They've got a lot of veteran kids who guys like TJ DiMattei who've been around 3 or 4 years and have suffered some tough losses. And they're motivated as well. That potential Old Forge Elk Lake matchup in the semifinals is going to be a good one. So, and don't discount Mountain View. They're the 5 seed. Yeah. But they're I think they're the defending champion. They've got again a lot of good players. Several good players, several good pitchers. I think they could. If they get hot, who knows? They could not. They got to get past Wyoming Seminary first. But if they do, maybe they would match up against Redeemer. And I think those 2 semifinals would be real juicy matchups. And and you're setting up a pretty good final.
Absolutely. That should be a really intriguing classification. Just quickly, Class 1A, you got Susquehanna as the top seed. They have a bye to the district championship, and Forest City's the 3 seed. MMI Prep is the 2 seed. So MMI Prep will host Forest City on Wednesday in the semifinal. Scotty, anything in Class 1A here?
Yeah, this is probably going to be a Susquehanna MMI Prep, final. Susquehanna, they came on towards the end of the season. They won 3 out of 4 games to get to the to get the number 1 seed. And they've got a couple of good players. William Marcy, 9 home runs this year, led the Lackawanna League with 9 home runs. Matthew Callender, 6-1 on the mound, 2.07 ERA, 76 strikeouts. So they've got some players, so they've got some players, and I think they could very well, if they win it, win the district, win that district title and get to the state tournament.
Absolutely. A few guys who have been on the Athlete of the Week ballot, Scotty. So
yes. I think sometimes we you forget about them since they're all the way up there by the New York border and everything like that. But they're like I said, they certainly have some, they have some talented players.
Absolutely. We'll keep moving right along. Let's go to softball, which is actually starting. They're playing as we speak.
Yes.
Actually, our colleague Tom Fox is at West as they host Wyoming Valley West in a 4-5 matchup. Also, Wilkes-Barre is hosting Scranton. Williamsport is the top seed. They get a bye to Wednesday to the semifinal, and Hazelton area also gets a bye as the 2 seed to a Wednesday game. Scotty, what are we looking at here in 6A?
I think Williamsport is the defending champ. They're the only team in that bracket with a winning record. So I think clearly they would rate the favorite. Hazelton has got a pretty good potent lineup and potent attack and everything. West Scranton is a team that they play in a tough. They only they're 7-13 overall. I think they only won like 4 games in the league but they play in a tough Division 1 of the Lackawanna League. So that could maybe have tested them and toughen them up for the for the postseason. So they would have if they win their game today over Valley West, which only has 1 win. Again, on paper, you would think that they would win that game. That sets up a matchup against Williamsport. So perhaps perhaps they could pull off an upset there. And they did get a little get a little momentum going into the playoffs, winning their last 3 games. To get into the heading into the postseason. So I would think they're maybe one team that could be a little bit of a surprise, in that 6A. But clearly Williamsport is the favorite.
Absolutely, and I'm just curious while you were talking to an update from Tom Fox. West is winning that game 10-1. So
okay,
yeah. So I didn't undercut you at all, which is good. It would have been bad.
You come back and say, well, Wyoming Valley West is winning again.
Exactly. Oh, that's great. See, this is good stuff. So moving on to 5A, we've got Delaware Valley hosting Crestwood today. We've got Piston Area hosting Shikellamy as well today. Abington Heights and North Pocono have the byes. Abington Heights, the 1 seed. North Pocono, the 2 seed. Obviously, Scotty, the Abington Heights and North Pocono, there's a lot of talent there. But what are you looking at in Class 5A?
Yeah, I mean, clearly I'm looking at, those two Lackawanna League teams, meeting in the final. I'm sure Pittston Area could have something to say about that,
Right.
against possibly, against North Pocono. But I think Abington and North Pocono are the top two teams. Abington beat them twice during the Division I season in the Lackawanna League. I'd have to rate Abington. I think North Pocono's got an excellent team, but they got a number of young players.
Yeah.
So I think there's certainly a team to watch out for in the future. Abington's got a lot. Is a lot. I think a little bit more experienced. You got players. You got players like Lawrence Stalika.
Yeah. Yep.
Isabel Wilmot. Both of them are all state players. They've been through this. They've been through this before. They've been in the postseason before. They've been in the deep runs in the state tournament. And I honestly, I feel Abington could, has that potential. Is one of several softball teams in our area, and even from the Lackawanna League that could make a run in the state tournament. So,
right.
Again, I'm looking for an Abington North Pocono final with Abington maybe coming out on top.
Right, absolutely, and like you were mentioning, I shouldn't overlook obviously Pittston Area. I mean, they made the state final last year. Of course, they had Gianna Adams, and she's no longer there, but there's that experience there as well.
Yeah, and it comes down to again, coming back to North Pocono with its youth.
Right.
I mean, Pittston Area has a number of players that were, you mentioned made that run to the state final last year. So they're battle tested, they're experienced. Now I'm not going to equate the same thing, but a lot of the younger players from North Pocono were on the team, the youth team that went, went to I think the state championship or something, or the Little League the softball World Series, whatever it was a couple of years ago.
Right.
So they do have that, tournament experience, et cetera. But it's clearly different on the high school level, and but they're going to be a team to if they don't break through this year, and they certainly could knock off Abington Heights in the final. Tough to beat a team 3 times in one season,
right.
But they're going to be a team down the road. You definitely want to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, just quickly, the Abington Heights did beat North Pocono twice this year. The first matchup, it was 5-4, and the other one, it was 7-3. So that just kind of speaks to your point. In Class 4A, this is obviously something that, this is a classification we were looking at since the beginning of the year. Not to overshadow any of the other teams, but you got top seed Tunkhannock and number 2 seed Valley View, 2 extremely, extremely talented teams in this area. This tournament gets started tomorrow. Tunkhannock facing Hanover area, Valley View facing Scranton Prep, Dallas and Berwick facing off, and Wallenpaupack hosting Wyoming area. Scotty, talk a little bit about this Class 4A.
Yeah, this, we mentioned it before with the in the 5A in baseball with Pittston and Abington Heights about only one team going. It's the same thing here. It's a shame because both Tunkhannock and Valley View have the talent that could make, it was one of those things. If they both were to make the state tournament, it would not surprise me if they met in the state semifinal,
right?
Or if they were on opposite sides of the bracket in the state final, because that's how good these teams are. Tunkhannock's got an excellent pitcher in Mackenzie Hannon, an excellent player in infielder Aaron Van Ness. They're certainly a team that's capable of making a deep run. Valley View, it's got 4 Division I players on its roster. Taylor Cawley, Abby Call, Callie Karwoski are all region player of the year last year in the for the paper, and Zoe Krapovich is also another Division I, is the 4th Division I. call your, two outstanding pitchers. They got a excellent slugging lineup. This game, this is going to be, probably should be the district final, and then whoever emerges from that, certainly has the potential to go on a run.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another intriguing classification in Class 3A. Obviously, again, not to overlook anybody else, but you have a very talented Lake Lehman team that is the number one seed, gets a bye to the semifinals, and Mid Valley's obviously they've been there for years now, and they are the number 2 seed here, also getting a bye to the semifinals. Western Wayne and will host Carbondale area tomorrow, and we've got Riverside hosting Lakeland tomorrow as well. Scotty, what are we looking at in Class 3A?
You're looking at, just like in Tunkhannock and Valley View, you're looking at, Lehman, Mid Valley, the top 2 seeds reaching the final. Lehman's got, 2 standout players, Kirsten Finarelli and Hannah Trapago, excellent offensive players. Trapago is, a dominant pitcher. You certainly, they're a team that, if they emerge from the district, could move on and go far in states. Mid Valley 2 years ago were state champs.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of, number of players who played on that team. They've got a standout pitcher named Hazelton. They've got some really good, potent bats in the lineup. Mackenzie Adolphson, Elise Larson. It's just, this is going to be two powerful offenses, two very good offenses, 2 very good pitchers. And, it's going to be one of those, the cliche, whoever makes the least mistakes is going to win that game.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And you mentioned it, Scotty, speaking of 2 years ago, Miranda Runco is doing great things at Villanova. So, no, go ahead. You going to say something?
No, I was going to add to that. Yeah, she set the I think the single season home run record for Villanova this year. So she's doing a great job down there.
Absolutely. And Scotty, I don't think I've done it yet, but I've almost called you Joby like 3 times because he's the only person I talk to on this. So we're still doing okay.
I've been called worse.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's fair. Moving on to 2A, we've got Elk Lake as the top seed, getting a bye to the semifinals. In the bottom of the bracket, Holy Redeemer is the 2 seed. They'll be hosting Mountain View today. Actually, they're doing that right now. Dunmore is hosting Blue Ridge, and Montrose is hosting Lackawanna Trail. Scotty, what are we looking at in 2A?
Well, we're looking at Elk Lake. Elk Lake's drive for 5 here, I guess. Yeah. They've won the last 4 championships. Kind of interesting. They started the season 0-4. They were down at a tournament. They went down in down in Myrtle Beach. They lost 3 games, and then they came back, and then they lost to Tunkhannock.
Right.
Since then they've won 16 straight games. So they're certainly, there's certainly a team, that's got experience and, top-notch players. Marissa Horn is an excellent pitcher. Leah Traver, leads the offensive attack for Elk Lake. I think the title goes through them. You're going to have to take it from them, if you want to win it. Redeemer, Holy Redeemer isn't a bad team. They have a pretty good lineup as well. Dunmore is a team that has got a pretty good offense, a pretty good pitcher in Rachel Walsh. Again, we were talking about the Montrose baseball team. Montrose's softball team, isn't too shabby either. So that's one of those things where that Montrose, if in the first round, or if they were to meet at some point, actually Montrose would play Elk Lake if the seeds hold true to form. Could Montrose get, they met a couple times during the league season. Could they give Elk Lake a bit of a challenge? So, right. But again, I think Elk Lake, the title goes through Elk Lake. They're the 4-time champs. You're going to have to take it from them if you want to win the district title.
Absolutely. And Scotty, moving last but definitely not least, Class 1A, in softball. We've got Holy Cross as the number 1 seed, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, going from 2A to 1A this season. And they'll be facing Susquehanna Thursday, and we'll have Old Forge hosting Forest City in the other semifinal. Scott, this, again, not to overlook the other teams, but this is a Holy Cross team that's extremely talented and probably has some aspirations, not to look too far ahead, but competing for a state title here.
Yeah, I really think Holy Cross has the potential to make a run, deep run in the in Class 1A. They're talented. They're talented. Up and down the lineup with players like Mia Galella. They've got they've got a real good pitcher in Ava Schmidt.
Yep.
Peyton Grabowski, their catcher, is come on. They've just got a really potent attack. And I covered the game, the Division III playoff game, or the Division II playoff game, excuse me, against Mid Valley for the division title. And they just they were Schmidt was throwing a 2-0 shutout going into the 7th. Mid Valley came back. Mid Valley had numerous opportunities to push across that winning run, and Schmidt just found a way to strand runners, get out of jams, and then they finally scored 5 runs in the top of the 10th inning and then held on in the bottom of the 10th to win 7-5. So that's the kind of stuff you need to if you're gonna win in the state playoffs. And I think Holy Cross has all the ingredients. I really I think Old Forge made a run in Division I last year to the state semifinals. They graduated a lot of those players, so they're going to be a little bit of a disadvantage going against Holy Cross. But I really think Holy Cross is the favorite to win the district title here. And then I see them maybe perhaps making a deep run in states.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to see it. So while that is our baseball, softball, a little bit of a breakdown of it, Scott, I really appreciate you joining. Be sure to follow along here. We're going to have tons of coverage of all the sports, but definitely baseball, softball. Scott's going to be busy with, coverage, everything around it. Like I said, he's got a preview feature on Thor Kelly of Scranton. That's going to be in tomorrow's paper. That's Tuesday's paper. But go to that website, the Times-Tribune.com/sports. We'll have everything up there. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, we'll have Sam's at lacrosse tonight. Joby will have us covered for the state track and field. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Be sure to follow along. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, Scott, thank you for bailing me out here. You did a fantastic job of, this isn't your first, it's far from your first rodeo here. You've been doing this longer than I've been alive. So, but I by the way, Scott was also my professor at the University of Scranton. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and joining me here this Monday evening. So, and hopefully you get your grass cut.
Yeah, I think I'll be able to. The sun is still out. I'll still have some daylight to get it done. So
very good, very good. Well, Scott, I'm gonna end the show here. I'll pause it. We'll talk for a little bit. But as far as our listeners, hope you enjoyed the show. Again, thank you to Kaylyn Davis of Lakeland Track and Field for joining us. She was our Athlete of the Week, brought to you by the Lehigh Valley Orthopedic Institute, as it is every week. But until then, follow us everywhere. Follow us on Facebook, the Times-Tribune Sports, and Instagram. Visit our website, thetimes-tribune.com/sports. Go to our Twitter page, @SportsTT. Definitely follow Scott Walsh. He'll be out there, SWalshTT. So follow us everywhere. We'll have plenty of coverage, and good luck to all the teams out there. But as for now, Scotty, thank you for joining me, and we'll probably have you, but we got to have you back on again. This is fantastic.
Well, there's enough stuff going on. If I can fit it in, I'll be glad to do it. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff coming up, Joe.
You know it. All right, everybody.